Amara's train pulled into Brussels just as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the city's medieval spires and grand facades. The journey from Paris had been fraught with unease, her thoughts circling around the stolen heirloom and the cryptic words of her grandmother's letter. She had read and reread the letter countless times, searching for hidden meanings in her grandmother's final words. "This necklace holds the key to our family's history. Protect it well, for there are those who would do anything to possess it." The words seemed to pulse with an ominous energy, and now in the heart of Brussels, Amara felt the weight of that warning more than ever. She stepped off the train, pulling her coat tighter around her against the chill of the evening air. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her phone to check the address she had been given by a contact in Paris. The name Laurent was unfamiliar, but according to her contact, he was a reputable art dealer with knowledge of rare African artifacts. If anyone could help her trace the stolen necklace, it was him. The station was bustling with activity, the usual mix of travelers, commuters, and tourists making their way through the ornate halls. Amara's steps felt heavy as she walked, each footfall echoing her anxiety. Her surroundings blurred as she focused on the task ahead. She needed to find this Laurent, recover the necklace, and unravel the mystery that had begun to consume her life. Amara left the station and made her way to the Marolles district, an area known for its antique shops and vintage markets. The streets were narrow, lined with buildings that leaned inwards as if conspiring to hide secrets from the past. The cobblestones beneath her feet were worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, and the air was thick with the scent of aged wood, musty leather, and the faintest hint of incense wafting from a nearby shop. She felt a strange mix of comfort and unease as she navigated the district's winding streets. The eclectic mix of African and European influences reminded her of her own life, a blend of cultures that sometimes felt at odds with each other. She passed shop windows filled with curiosities, old maps, vintage furniture, ancient tapestries, each item a relic of a time long gone. Finally, she found the address. It was a small, unmarked door between two boutiques, almost hidden from view. A sign hung above it, worn by time, the lettering barely legible. Amara hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the first step in what she knew would be a dangerous journey. She took a deep breath and knocked on the door. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a man in his mid-40s, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. His features were sharp, with high cheekbones and a strong jawline, but it was his eyes that caught Amara's attention. They were a cold, steely gray, assessing her with a calculating gaze that made her shiver despite herself. His hair was dark, slicked back in a style that seemed deliberately old-fashioned. "You must be Amara," he said, his voice smooth and practiced. There was a hint of an accent she couldn't quite place. Belgian, perhaps, with a touch of something else. "I've been expecting you," Amara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Laurent?" "Yes," he replied, stepping aside to let her in. "Please, come in." The interior of the shop was dimly lit, the walls lined with shelves that seemed to stretch endlessly into the shadows. Each shelf was filled with artifacts and antiques, items from every corner of the world. There were African masks, Middle Eastern carpets, European porcelain, and Asian ceramics, all arranged with meticulous care. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and old leather, mingling with the faint aroma of incense burning somewhere out of sight. Amara couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as she looked around. This was a place of history, a place where the past lived on in the objects that had been preserved for centuries. But beneath the surface, there was something else, a sense of danger, of secrets hidden in plain sight. Laurent led her to a small sitting area at the back of the shop, where a tea set was already laid out on a low table. The cups were delicate, made of fine china, and the teapot was adorned with intricate patterns that looked almost ancient. Laurent gestured for her to sit, then poured them both a cup of tea. Amara accepted the cup, her hands trembling slightly as she held it. "I understand you're here about a certain necklace," Laurent said, studying her over the rim of his cup. Amara felt a chill run down her spine. She had been so focused on finding the necklace that she hadn't considered how much Laurent might already know. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady despite the anxiety gnawing at her. "It was stolen from me in Paris. I was told you might have information about it." Laurent's smile faded slightly, replaced by a more serious expression. He set his cup down carefully, his fingers lingering on the delicate porcelain for a moment before he spoke. "Stolen, you say? How unfortunate. I did indeed acquire a necklace recently, a beautiful piece, but—" He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the table as if he were weighing his words carefully. "There's something I need to tell you." Amara leaned forward, her heart pounding. "What is it?" Laurent sighed, his expression one of reluctant resignation. "The necklace you're looking for, your grandmother's necklace. I did purchase it from a man named Victor. He's known in certain circles for dealing in rare and valuable artifacts. I was planning to sell it to a client who collects African heirlooms, but—" He hesitated again, his eyes darkening with a shadow of fear. "But last night, my shop was broken into. The necklace was stolen, along with several other items. I suspect it was Victor himself who orchestrated the theft, though I can't prove it. He's a dangerous man, Miss Okafor, and he clearly didn't want to let that necklace slip through his fingers." Amara's mind raced. Victor. The name sent a shiver down her spine, a cold dread settling in the pit of her stomach. This man, whoever he was, seemed to be one step ahead of her at every turn. He had sold the necklace to Laurent only to steal it back again. The realization filled her with a mix of frustration and fear. Victor wasn't just interested in the necklace, he was determined to possess it at any cost. "Where can I find him?" Amara asked, her voice trembling with urgency. Laurent hesitated, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. "Miss Okafor, I must warn you, Victor is not someone to be trifled with. He's ruthless, and he has connections in places you wouldn't believe. If you go after him, you'll be putting yourself in grave danger." "I don't care," Amara replied, her resolve hardening. "That necklace belongs to my family. I have to get it back." Laurent seemed to weigh her words carefully before finally reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small piece of paper and scribbled an address on it, then handed it to her. "This is where he operates," Laurent said quietly. "But please be careful. Victor is not a man to take lightly." Amara took the paper, her heart racing as she stared at the address. "Thank you," she said, standing up and slipping the paper into her coat pocket. Laurent rose as well, his expression one of concern. "Before you go, there's something else you should know. That necklace, it's more than just a family heirloom. There are legends, stories about the power it holds. Victor knows this, and that's why he's so desperate to keep it. You're stepping into something much bigger than you realize." Amara felt a surge of determination. "I have to do this," she said simply. "It's my family's legacy." Laurent nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "Very well. Good luck, Amara. And remember, trust no one." Amara left the shop and stepped back into the cool Brussels evening. The sky had darkened and the streetlights cast long shadows across the cobblestones. The once bustling district was now quiet, the shops closed and the streets nearly deserted. A sense of foreboding hung in the air as Amara began her journey back to her hotel, clutching the address Laurent had given her in her hand. As she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every sound, every flicker of movement in the corner of her eye set her on edge. She quickened her pace, her heels clicking sharply against the cobblestones. The buildings seemed to close in around her, the narrow streets winding like a labyrinth with no clear escape. The address Laurent had given her was etched into her mind, but the closer she got to the hotel, the more she questioned whether she was making the right decision. Victor was dangerous. Laurent's warning echoed in her ears, but she couldn't afford to turn back now. Finally, she reached her hotel, a small, unassuming building tucked away on a quiet street. She hurried inside, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she leaned against the door to her room. She felt the weight of the day's events pressing down on her, the fear and uncertainty gnawing at her resolve. She locked the door behind her and slumped onto the bed, her hands trembling as she pulled the piece of paper from her pocket. The address stared back at her, a silent reminder of the danger she was about to face. Victor. The name alone sent a shiver down her spine. Whoever this man was, he held the key to getting the necklace back. But at what cost? Laurent's warning echoed in her mind. Trust no one. Amara knew she couldn't turn back now. She was too far in, and the stakes were too high. The necklace was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a connection to her past, to her grandmother, and to a legacy she barely understood. But one thing was clear: she had to find Victor, confront him, and retrieve what was rightfully hers. Meanwhile, as Amara wrestled with her doubts and fears, Victor was already several steps ahead. He had known from the moment he sold the necklace to Laurent that he would need to get it back. The transaction had been nothing more than a ruse, a way to keep the necklace hidden while he arranged for its retrieval. Laurent, with all his connections and knowledge, had been an unwitting pawn in Victor's game. Victor's men were professionals, skilled in the art of theft, deception, and violence. They had been watching Laurent's shop for days, waiting for the right moment to strike. The night before Amara's arrival, they had moved with precision, bypassing the shop's security systems and slipping inside undetected. The theft itself had been swift, silent. Victor's men had cracked the safe, retrieved the necklace, and disappeared into the night, leaving no trace of their presence. By the time Laurent discovered the break-in, the necklace was already back in Victor's possession, and Laurent was left to wonder how he had been so easily outmaneuvered. Victor now held the key to the treasure, and with Amara closing in, he knew it was only a matter of time before their paths crossed. He had been keeping tabs on her, following her movements from the moment she left Paris. He knew she was determined, resourceful, and willing to take risks, traits that made her both a threat and a potential ally. But Victor trusted no one. He had built his empire on lies, deceit, and manipulation, and he wasn't about to let anyone stand in his way. The necklace was too important, too powerful to fall into the wrong hands, and if Amara proved to be a problem, he wouldn't hesitate to eliminate her. Back in her hotel room, Amara was oblivious to the danger that lay ahead. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the address Laurent had given her, trying to summon the courage to confront Victor. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued her since the theft gnawed at her resolve, but she knew she couldn't let it consume her. She thought of her grandmother, the woman who had raised her, who had taught her the stories and traditions of their ancestors. Amara took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She couldn't turn back now. The necklace was out there, in Victor's hands, and she was the only one who could retrieve it. She would find him, confront him, and take back what was rightfully hers. The next morning, she would make her way to the address Laurent had given her, where she would meet Victor, the man who had stolen from her not once, but twice. But tonight, in the stillness of her hotel room, she allowed herself a moment of doubt, of fear, wondering if she was truly ready for what awaited her. Tomorrow, she would find out.